Hello. In this time when there is so much attention being paid to artificial intelligence, AI, the question that I, as a knowledge manager, want to pose is it time to get back to the core of communities of practice? Now, I don't say this as someone against AI. In fact, I read AI at university. It's my first career for almost 10 years coming out of university before I really flipped into knowledge management ever since. But I'm in favor really of, a very realistic and responsible kind of AI. And having said that, I think it's relevant that knowledge management should be involved with AI at this time, very much so. But I think there's other things possibly distracting us from the real core of communities of practice. Now, something I really like about knowledge management is that we are like a sponge. We're very porous to taking in, the best ideas from all sorts of fields, from IT, from process engineering, from human development practice, and all sorts of different areas. And everything that we learn from these different fields, makes us better at knowledge management. And there's not very much that is exclusively our own. I mean, maybe nothing, but probably the one idea that maybe we can't claim as knowledge management to have invented, but I think we can say we took most to our hearts more than any other field has, is that idea of communities of practice. We really do like that idea, amongst many other things, in knowledge management. So why am I saying, is it time to get back to the core of communities of practice? Let's get into what I'm talking about. In knowledge management and in communities of practice, we're really not lacking for all kinds of helpful stuff. We're not lacking for playbooks, roadmaps, pathways, templates, guides, models, my favorite, canvases, all kinds of good guidance that colleagues in the field of knowledge management have kindly produced and kindly shared with us very often to help us set up and run successful communities of practice. And I love these. As I say, if a colleague is kind enough to produce this and share it, I will take a copy, I'll ask for a copy, I'll download a copy, I'll look at it, and I'll keep it. And I find them very useful and helpful. And I know that they are very helpful to lots of people, because sometimes a colleague perhaps comes to me and says, Rob, I think I want to start a community of practice around this idea, but I'm not quite sure of all the ins and outs of it. And as a starter, this sort of information is really helpful to them. And also, as we progress through running communities, if we're looking for ideas and inspiration, going to all of these sort of materials that exist is very helpful to people indeed. So I'm very much in favour of all of that guidance that is, kindly shared and used. I'm not against it in the slightest bit. What I just want to say is, as well as treasuring all of that, let's focus a little bit on what lies at the core. Now, there's nothing in this that you probably don't already know, but maybe I'll be able to illustrate what I mean by let's get back to it. So it's not something you're coming to for the first time, but maybe it's a reminder and a prompt to say, let's get back to it. So what am I talking about when I talk about the core? Nobody really will argue that at the core of community of practice is people. It's people who come together around their passion, their enthusiasm to steward and develop a particular practice or subject matter, who want to develop their own skills and experience and performance, who want perhaps to develop the state of the art, who perhaps want to provide, expert service to others who aren't ever going to get involved in the community, but may want that guidance and help from the experts. So nobody really argues that at its core, a community is people. However, we do often act in a way whereby we verbally say, oh yeah, of course it's people, but sometimes act in a different way. And here's a common scenario I've seen quite a lot of times. Perhaps a tentative community sponsor or community leader will say, yeah, I want to start this community and I want there to be a list of people who we invite, and they come along every month to a meeting and we give them an update on what's going on. And I think we should have a different external guest speaker each month. And maybe we make sure everyone in the community is given a task that they have to do or a role in the community. Actually, and then we can link that to their performance objectives in the HR system that are part of their annual appraisal. And let's make sure we have an intranet site that says, oh, welcome to the community, and it says who's the sponsor and who's the leader and when the next meeting is. And perhaps we'll have a library of sort of templates and guides and materials that these community members must use, when they do their work. So look, all of those are terrific ideas. I put them with the other really good ideas that, done in the right way, could be really good attributes or practices for a good community to have. But they're kind of just giving a nod to the idea that community is people first and foremost. It isn't starting with the people. It's not starting with what is their passion, what are their goals. A few years ago, actually quite a few years ago, the ideas of employee engagement and employee discretionary effort were really quite vogue and having their day in the sun, just as knowledge management at one time had its day in the sun, and the current generation of AI is very much having its day in the sun at the moment. Well, engagement and discretionary effort were big news. They were sort of turf war fought over a little bit by communications function and people function, HR function, if you like, as to really whose it was. And they're great ideas. It's a great idea to not just tell the staff, but to engage and involve them very much. And it is true, if people's passion and their dedication are really engaged, they will willingly put their discretionary effort into doing, a good quality job for their customers and with their colleagues and so on. This is absolutely true. Then on the other hand, if they're, disengaged, if they're turned off at every point from really being involved and feeling that ownership with the business and the outcomes, you're likely to see a withdrawal of discretionary effort. So it was a really, really good idea. Personally, I think it was killed a little bit by being programmatized and being served up to the staff of organizations as a sort of packaged thing, very sort of channeled, and you were engaged because you were told, really, and then you were expected to sort of share your discretionary efforts and sort of volunteer for things that actually were put up by someone else. I think communities of practice really are probably a killer app for staff engagement and discretionary efforts. But here's the point we get to where we argue. So as I said, we don't generally argue that communities at their core are people, but I went on to say and illustrate very often we just, act in a contrary way. Even though we've said they're people, we actually then seem to focus on everything else. But my second sort of response to the tentative community leader and community sponsor, when I say, yeah, let's start with the people, let's find out what they're involved with, is to say, not only is the community at its core people, but it's theirs. It's theirs. So here's a point where probably some knowledge managers will diverge from my opinion. I think many will say, the community of practice within an organization has to exist for a business purpose. But I personally think it's an oblique strategy, that if you go straight to the purpose, you really are going down the road of making this, a team that is under some kind of command and control, which is, of course, an appropriate model for, getting projects and so on done. Of course, you still want elements of engagement and involvement, but, some element of direction is appropriate for getting things safely and efficiently delivered and completed. But I would say the community of practice is not only people, but it's for them and it's theirs. And if you trust them and start with them, what is their passion to get involved with, what is it their passion to do, then you're going to get more of that engagement and discretionary effort. And also, you're probably going to get those business benefits, as I say, in an oblique way rather than in a direct way, because people don't go to work to mess around. Okay, maybe you've met some, but you've seen more often that actually people discuss in quiet corners about things that they think aren't operating well, decisions that aren't good, things that could be done better. And amongst the people who do the work, there will often be a consensus about what the better way of doing things would be. So they care enough about this to discuss it. And trusted, they would like to try it as well. So I think we start with them, don't necessarily give them tasks and purposes, maybe help them because they might need to build the confidence that they really are being, empowered and given space to decide these things. You want them from their own hearts to decide what to do so they will feel committed, that they'll feel like owners and participants rather than, a compliant audience. If you don't do it right, you'll probably see them first of all attend, but not really be fully present. And later you'll probably see them not attend at all to your monthly meetings. And again, you've probably seen that. I certainly have. Well, the next thing is it's really important that these people in their community that is theirs get to know each other. And you might say, oh, that's kind of a nice to have, let's just leave that to take care of itself. And people will get to know each other. You'll get to know the people in your own work group. You'll get to know people who you work with on projects. You'll get to know, if they are different, you will get to know people you happen to sit with in a physical office. So if you habitually sit in the same place and other people do in a physical office, the effect is astonishing because when you suddenly change that, the bonds between those people go if they're not supported by other things like projects or work groups or so on. So yeah, people will get to know each other. They will go and have coffee and lunch together. They will chit chat during the day and share, what they're doing personally and about their families and what they did at the weekend and so on. They will get to know each other, but some won't. And in a community of practice, they're not coming together because they work together each day in a project or in a workplace setting that they sit together, or that they're in the same functional group. They're getting together because there's some other, non-organizational dimension that actually connects them, something to do with a practice or a subject that gets them together. I don't think this is optional, that people should be allowed to get to know each other. I think having activities that encourage them to be more involved and discussing are better. Now, of course, social elements to it are very good. If you meet socially, give them space, they know they're there together because they share this interest, and they will naturally talk about that as well as just getting to know each other, but they will naturally do that. If you wait long enough, they will actually start to organize things. They will actually start to organize, to have presentations and discussions, and perhaps other relations, work related relations outside of the group. Like they might say, well, can I call you up and talk about this issue, outside of the group setting. So these things will happen. They will get to know each other. But how we could make that work better, I think, would be to favor those social elements. Don't see them as a nice to have or as an optional extra. See them as really foundational to knitting this community of people together in a way that they get to know each other, like each other, at least work out who each other is and where they're coming from, and what their specific interests and strengths and so on are, and use methods that get them talking and working together. So rather than a presentation, a problem solving session about the same topic, or a little bit of presentation to give them something to talk about, and then plenty of involvement of everyone, really taking part and getting to know each other. It's very important, therefore, that they are active rather than passive in their participation, so that they are interacting with each other. And important that, whoever's facilitating is watching, who's quietly withdrawing, who's dominating, and all of those things that we know about. It's going to build up knowledge of each other, that relationship capital in the small. It's going to build up trust. It's going to get them eliciting and vocalizing much more tacit knowledge sharing than they would otherwise. It really helps to get together physically in the same place, perhaps have a meal together. It really helps. It takes a bit more work to do this virtually, and you probably have to really think hard about working in deliberate steps to allow people to get to know each other. It's very important. Okay, well, after getting to know each other, I think one of the real results of this is going to be a sense in the group that they've got to become a group, and that they now feel that they have a sense of belonging. It's kind of more of a state than a stage or an activity, this feeling of belonging. It's a people thing, it's a people connection thing, but it's also, I think, to do with feeling safe, accepted, seen, respected, trusted, and being able to trust. Feeling a kind of ownership and stewardship and identity with the place that is the community. Able to feel at home with my people who get me and I get them. And I think to build that, you've really got to go through these stages of understanding that it's a people thing, and that very human matters that we all know about from our own experience really matter, and work hard on getting to know each other. and do things particularly like, welcoming newcomers. Um, I hesitate to, suggest any specific intervention because there's lots of interventions that you could use, but I've seen work, very well. Um, Birthday celebrations, celebrations of people's career achievements, recognition of their identity, paying respect to their knowledge, asking for their participation, asking for their views, actually allowing and accepting that you don't always all agree. I mentioned a little while ago that my view is community is an oblique strategy and that communities are for the community members, not for the business. And I know that some people will disagree with that, and we can respectfully disagree. When you feel that you belong, you don't think you're going to be shamed or dismissed for having a different view. You feel that you're going to be accommodated, and respectfully, one can disagree and see the other point of view, but you're still in and included and part of the community. And there's so many things that we can do to keep building on that, inviting people's input, inviting them to say what kind of roles you could take. Now, remember, I said there was lots of good things that the tentative community sponsor and community leader were suggesting, but done in the right way, rather than giving everyone a role. Once people belong, they feel that they want to take a role, and then we try and make it possible for them to shape a role that really matches, what they need, what the community needs. And of course, their stewardship and feeling of identity with the community will help them to fit in and do something for others and for the community, as well as more directly for themselves. So in many ways, this core idea is kind of a lens for looking at things that we might otherwise do in the community, but actually think of doing them in a more human centric way. So the next point is really what we mostly talk about when we talk about communities of practice. We talk about what they do. They learn together, they perform together, they share knowledge, they do meet, they grow the practice of the actual community itself, its knowledge base, its standards and so on, but also their own personal knowledge and experience and capability. They grow together and perform together. And I think what matters in this phase is like it's all of the good things we have in those guidebooks and pathways and canvases about communities, setting them up and running them. But really, I'm saying through the lens of this human-centric point of view, really recognizing that it matters that what you're doing is not just a mechanical thing to fill the agenda, but that is a relational thing that is about the community, is about the relationship between people, is about the exchange between them, is about their drive to improve the knowledge and the practice and the community itself. And there's different ways when you see it through that lens of doing all of the things that we do. We make things perhaps a little more open-ended. We, allow a bit more experimentation. So, for example, if somebody is giving a presentation or leading a discussion on a project story, we've got lots of models for that. And I suppose one of the best known ones is the STAR framework, which is like situation, task, action, result. You say, what was the problem? What was the actual thing that you needed to do about it, what role you took, and what was the result. And usually these things have the arc of telling a success story and a hero story of how good it was. And many people in organizations and business are taught really to tell project stories and case studies as star stories following that arc. This is a nice framework. It's a nice mnemonic. It has a really good use, but there's really so much more we can do in a community of practice. So we might, instead of telling the normal star story, say how it felt at key moments, what decisions you had to make, what you were weighing up, the decision that you reached and why, how you view that decision now, and how you view your decision making now, and perhaps it makes you feel differently about, what the established practice was for doing things. So a project story can be told in a different way if we're taking this more human-centric lens on it. Lessons learned, again, very often the drive is to say, yeah, we got some small things wrong, but we sorted all of that. There's sort of a closure and an answer, and it's slate is white clean and it's all good. But you don't have to be a hero. You can admit a mistake. You can admit a gap. And it might be something that other people can also step in then and share and say, good on you for admitting this mistake and that you think you've learned your lesson. And, maybe I should too, because I've made similar mistakes and done these things as well. Again, innovation, there's good tools and techniques and approaches for innovation. It doesn't have to be a runaway success if there is learning. And in the right community spirit, we can allow these small experiments and trying things out, trying new ideas, and we accept the learning. We don't have to be heroes and always, demonstrate perfect success at everything. And so the result of taking this path with communities of practice, this more human-centric path that honors, I think, the human core of communities, I think, is a feeling that they are part of something great. And I think it can be great in at least three ways. Obviously, we talk about what benefits and services the community enables to others. So the business benefits, but also the benefits that more transactional visitors and users, uh, um, gain from their interaction with the community with this expert practice. That they have some, specific need at a specific time from. They're not going to join it. So in one sense, the community enables, a lot of things to happen. It also enables the members themselves to, grow their capability, their performance, their careers, their esteem. So, it can enable things beyond the strict bounds of what you might say were the community activities. It can also very much celebrate what it achieves in itself. Some communities will set themselves goals to, I don't know, update the body of knowledge, update the training, deliver training in their practice or their subject area. And so they can celebrate, the community's own goals that it sets and achieves. And thirdly, I think there's something intrinsic for the people, because work should work for us as people. It's we as people who invented this whole society culture around work, organizations, and going to work and being serious and doing these activities. It's we as people all together who invented this for all sorts of good reasons, but it should still work for us. It should still recognize that we are human and we all understand individually what that means to be human. And once we go through this process, we empathize more with everyone else as being human. And so I think there's also an intrinsic level of being in a community that makes it part of something great. At the core, communities are people first. They need to get to know each other. They grow and perform together. They feel this sense of belonging, and as a result, it's a great thing, and they feel that it's part of something great too. And now we often talk about the knowing doing gap, and many people think that knowledge management is all down in the knowing. But really, I think it's always been in the doing, because it's the doing that takes the knowledge and applies it, learns new knowledge through experience and practice, and refines what we thought we knew and feeds our knowledge base. But as well as, the knowing and the doing kinds of knowledge, I think very much specifically for communities of practice, we need to think about how's it feeling? What is the feeling? What is the ethos of communities of practice? So, is it time to get back to the core of community? Well, you know, not specifically because of AI, but it's always time to get back to the core of communities of practice and rediscover those important starting points and important themes that will inform what we do and how we do it, because sometimes it ain't what you do, but the way that you do it, that are really more human centric. And not just because we're nice people, but because that is the right way to work with this model to be effective. Yeah, sure, it's time to get back to the core of communities of practice. Thank you.